A new report warns that a lack of funding for rural youth support in England is leaving millions of young people at risk of isolation, loneliness and poor mental health. The National Youth Agency is calling for a government plan to ensure all children and teenagers have access to support, regardless of where they live. Adam Ely reports.
Right, and then we need to get ready.
Hey, on go.
Here in Somerset, youth work can take many forms.
Yeah, we had to make a fire, obviously.
We used the flint and striker.
Yeah.
This group of 12 and 13-year-olds have been carrying out habitat conservation work and learning to start campfires.
It's very different to what I've normally done, but yeah, I enjoy it quite a lot, yeah.
The charity Young Somerset provide many other support avenues too, from safeguarding vulnerable young people to improving employment opportunities in areas with poor social mobility.
Yeah, I've been learning how to do mechanics, learning the people skills that I should have and communication. In smaller towns there's not really much that you can do or look into of getting a job. They're mainly in the cities and bigger towns.
According to England's youth work body, the National Youth Agency, young people in rural areas risk being left behind. It wants more trained youth workers to combat an increasing trend for rural young people to be targeted by county lines drug gangs. Yet it says council funding for youth services is 25% lower per person in rural communities than it is in urban areas.
Young people have been forgotten about in rural communities in terms of our national focus. Local authority budgets have shrunk. Everything's gone to our towns and cities, and therefore, if you live in a rural area, you are less likely to be able to get access to those services. In every area, there should be a plan about how we're going to provide resources, services, and give young people access to the real support they need.
Youth services can also provide mental health support, but some organisations say they are becoming increasingly stretched. Alyssa reached out for help during the pandemic.
I'd already struggled with mental well-being beforehand, and then I think lockdown just made it a bit worse. And I think reaching out to people at Young Somerset after having the activities with them and gaining that trust with them, it made it a lot easier.
She is now volunteering as a youth worker herself, with the aim of helping other young people.
If there's an issue or something that's gone wrong and you're able to talk from experience or from what you've been through to go, look, this is how I did it, this is what I'd recommend, and then you see them grow from it. It's a really, really nice feeling inside.
The government says it's given more than £100 million to youth work charities during the pandemic and is investing in schemes to help youth workers qualify. But after a decade of cuts to youth work from local authorities, campaigners say investment must be provided long term. Adam Ely, BBC News.
Harwood, who is head of the youth service organisation Young Somerset, joins us now. Nick, thank you for joining us. How much harder has it been providing these services during the last 18 months in the pandemic?
It's been a real challenge, but one that youth work is, as a profession, well equipped to deal with, because what we do is deploy positive staff who are highly skilled in engaging with vulnerable young people. And in the pandemic, what we were able to do was to deploy them alongside statutory services such as children's social care, the police and colleagues in health services, particularly mental health. And whilst it has been a challenge, we had to move our services online, but we were also able to go out into communities supporting vulnerable young people who, of course, at the time, certainly in the first lockdown, were in spaces with significantly less visible adults who could be a positive influence on them. And we worked with young people to support them through some very, very difficult and challenging circumstances. And as I said, in Somerset, did that in absolute partnership with statutory colleagues at the local authority.
What is it about how you approach youth work that makes you able to reach young people that maybe teachers, the police, social workers can't reach?
A youth work ethos is really simple. It's a voluntary relationship with young people. So we take the time to build relationships with young people that are open, honest, trusting, respectful, and critically led by them. So we don't do things to or for young people, we do things with young people. And that's a very different approach. We can get alongside them, we can engage with them at their level at a time and space that they want to. We can build that positivity and listen differently in a way that colleagues who have a more authoritative approach necessarily, they can't do that. And that's the beauty of working in partnership, as I said a minute ago, because we can come at things differently. We can offer something different into the life of that young person that will enhance their ability to make well-informed decisions about their future for themselves.
How do the challenges that young people in rural areas differ from those in towns and cities?
It's all the obvious things. It's increased isolation, both physically but also digitally as well. On Exmoor, there are still places that can't get dial-up internet, never mind broadband, and mobile signal is patchy at best in a lot of rural areas. So there's the isolation. There's also a difficulty in accessing the support and services that do exist in the county because of the geography and because of the lack of infrastructure in terms of transport and so on. And that does include progression to things like further education. And Somerset, of course, doesn't have a university. So actually, we get a lot of young people that leave to pursue, that academic higher education. And of course, we don't attract young people back into Somerset to study at that level as well. It can be about employment and a career horizon as well, where rural counties, are often job rich but career poor, in as much as there's lots of jobs. They may be seasonal, linked to the tourism industry or hospitality, and there's a lack of progression opportunities there as well, really. Affordable housing is an issue for young people as they become increasingly independent and finding somewhere, safe and nice for them to live. And as mentioned in the piece, social mobility is a real issue in rural areas.
The government says that they recognise the vital role of youth services. They say that that's why they've provided over £100 million to charities supporting young people during the pandemic. And there's this £500 million youth investment fund, which is a manifesto commitment for this Parliament. How are you seeing that money make a difference?
I think there's two bits to it. One is that's some of that money is a response, of course, prompted by the pandemic, and that was put very quickly into services that were under threat of disappearing because of other funding pressures prompted by COVID. So that was a useful investment to keep youth work services and youth workers accessible to young people when they needed them. The 500 million youth investment fund, welcome that at a national level. It's a very small amount of money when you stretch that across England and think about the volume of young people that would benefit from youth work. And as mentioned in your piece, the decline in the last decade or so of investment and cutting of certainly local authority-based youth services has had a real impact on the sector's ability to support children and young people at all levels. So what youth work is about is early intervention and preventative services, supporting young people so that their needs don't escalate, their vulnerability doesn't escalate, and they become a crisis and high risk and high need, which is very expensive. And of course, we know the pressures that colleagues in children's social care and the police are under in terms of keeping young people safe at a really basic level. So I would like to see that those monies are accelerated and an increased investment in the re-professionalisation, if you like, of youth work, and a recognition of its value, because I think that's been amplified and demonstrated largely during the pandemic.
And of course, some of these people are very much at risk of being targeted by gangs, the county lines problems and things like that. You've mentioned the re-professionalisation of the occupation of youth work. There's so much potential out there. You could see that from the young people that were interviewed for Adam Ely's report. What do young people tell you about what their hopes are?
Young people are brilliant. I think for me at the moment, and this has been brought into really sharp focus by the pandemic, all the issues we've spoken about. What we're trying to do is encourage young people to. People who say young people don't lack aspiration. They don't, in my experience. They have tons of aspiration. What sometimes they don't have is a horizon. They don't look long and they don't look far. Young people, of course, compartmentalize things. And they look in the immediacy, they look at the now. What we're trying to encourage young people is to find a voice that takes a longer view of their future in all areas of their lives, in their community, in the institutions they inhabit, in the peer groups they inhabit, and get them to think about what they can do for themselves to move forwards and develop really purposefully, coming out of an incredibly challenging time for young people. All of their normal socializations were ripped out instantly. School, friends, can't go out, can't do this, can't do that. And we are seeing, as was mentioned in the piece, a massive increase in demand in terms of our wellbeing and mental health services, alongside the youth work that's needed as well.
Nick Harwood, head of the charity Young Somerset, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.